The Midnight Gate. Welcome to Vale of Dark Whispers, where nightmares are real and no soul returns untouched. If you dare step through, make sure to like and subscribe. We'll be waiting. The night was colder than it should have been for early summer. Elijah received a text from his mom.
Mark needs to brush his teeth. Don't let him stay up too late. I love you.
Yeah.
He muttered, stuffing the phone in his back pocket. Mark had been begging to go to the park for days, and Elijah, like any teen, had better things to do. He finally gave in.
Just 10 minutes.
He'd said. But 10 minutes turned into 20. Elijah saw Tina, the girl from school, whom he had had a crush on since the start of the year. Tina was leaning against the old stone wall near the entrance. Elijah and Tina started talking and laughing.
Elijah,
She giggled.
you've got the cutest smile.
Tina asks in surprise.
Isn't that your brother on the carousel?
He turned his head up towards the carousel, just to see his brother disappear into the light. And then, Mark was gone. Gone like a ghost in a crowd. Elijah started running in the direction of the carousel to save his brother, but he stopped to look around. Elijah tightened his hoodie, barely hearing the buzz of the dying fairground behind him. Strings of broken lights flickered overhead like sickly fireflies, and the smell of burnt sugar and rust clung to the air like something rotting.
Mark.
He called, weaving between rusted game boots and slumped prize tents.
Mark. Come on, buddy, this isn't funny.
But no answer. Just minutes ago, Elijah had been laughing, flirting, distracted, and lost in the soft glow of a girl's smile by the popcorn stand. It had been 5 minutes, 10 at most. That was all it took for his 7-year-old brother to vanish. His heart thudded louder than the carnival music as panic tightened in his chest. Then, a whisper on the wind, a carousel's music box tune, impossibly soft, yet chilling. He turned. The carousel wasn't even supposed to be working. They passed it earlier. Caution tape draped across its chipped horses, lights dead, motors long since shut down. But now, it was spinning. Lights blinked in sickly reds and pale greens, flickering in a jerky rhythm. The horses, they moved strangely. Their mouths opened wider than they should, revealing wooden teeth that looked far too real. One of them had blood where the saddle met its spine. And there, near the edge, Elijah saw a blur of blonde hair. A small figure.
Mark.
Elijah shouted, running toward the ride. The moment his foot hit the platform, the world tilted. The carousel screamed. The carousel turned again, slower, louder. The horses were no longer wood. They almost seemed alive. They were stitched, groaning, and twitching. Some missing eyes, others screaming without mouths. He backed away slowly from the horse to the center of the carousel, but something ice-cold yanked him backwards. But slowly his body disappeared into the carousel, pulled across the ride like it weighed nothing. Sobbing children tore through the air, and everything around him bent, melted, and shifted. He stumbled, barely catching his balance as the world around him transformed. The sky darkened to a deep crimson. The trees beyond the carnival peeled away, revealing a vast, endless landscape of twisted rides and blackened tents under a bleeding moon. The carousel groaned to a stop. The horses now twitched like animals skinned alive. Hollow eyes following Elijah's every move. The ride behind him hissed, then disappeared, sucked into the ground like it had never existed. He was trapped.
Elijah.
The voice was Mark's. Faint, afraid, distant. He bolted forward. The sky, wrong. Purple-black clouds spiraled like galaxies around a red moon that throbbed like a wound. But this hellish carnival dimension was alive, and they wanted him. The ride creaked and groaned, then spoke,
1 minute every midnight. That's all you get, Ryder.
Elijah ran, heart hammering, sneakers slapping against sticky black tar that oozed with every step, like sponge cake soaked in something thick. The carnival stretched endlessly around him, but it wasn't the same one from before. It had mutated. Rides twisted into grotesque shapes, game booths dripped with melted plastic and bone, and something about the air moved like it breathed. In the distance, he spotted a cluster of children. He slowed, hope flickering in his chest, then froze. They weren't children. Their bodies were pale and swollen, eyes completely white, and lips curled into frozen grins, far too wide. They clutched strings, balloons floating eerily still in the red sky. Each balloon held something inside, a face, screaming, pressed to the inside of the rubber. One balloon turned toward Elijah as if it had sensed him. The face inside it looked like a boy no older than Mark, thrashing in silent agony, his mouth stretched in a silent scream. Then, a sound behind him. Pop. He spun. A clown, 7 feet tall, hunched and broken in all the wrong places, crawled from beneath a shattered game booth. Its makeup was smeared into a scream, its teeth thin as needles. In its hand was a balloon with a half-formed face inside, still melting. It sniffed the air.
Fresh.
It hissed, voice gurgling like syrup through glass.
You still have your soul.
The others began to move. Balloon children shuffled toward Elijah, balloons bobbing overhead like puppets on strings. The trapped souls inside began to bang against the rubber, desperate to warn him, to escape. He turned and ran. He ducked behind a cracked roller coaster frame, lungs burning. The clown's screech echoed behind him, followed by the slapping squeak of balloon feet dragging across the ground. He looks up to see the roller coaster above him. Its track curves like a spinal cord, rising high into a rotting sky. Screams echo from far in the park, but they are not from fear, but from forced laughter. He follows the sound. A line of children with brighter yellow glassy eyes is being ushered into the coaster's carts by hunched, grinning men in conductor uniforms that are as skin-tight as wax, lips stretched too wide. One whispers to a sobbing girl,
No crying, little one. It will break the ride.
The girl cries harder than before. Suddenly, a shriek echoes through the park, and metal halts. Something begins to crawl up the track. Elijah stumbles back, but one of the conductors notices him.
You Ryder. Fresh lungs. Come on.
He turns around and runs as fast as he can to get as far away as possible. He hears Mark's voice calling him.
Elijah.
Mark's voice again. Closer. This time it came from the roller coaster itself. He crept toward the entrance. The ride was monstrous. Twisted metal tracks coiling like intestines in the sky, carts shaped like grinning skulls, and laughter playing from speakers in garbled loops. The ticket booth was empty, but the red light above it blinked. Now boarding. He climbed in. The second he sat down, metal bars clamped over his legs. The cart jerked forward.
Please keep your hands inside the ride until they're no longer yours,
whispered the intercom. The coaster roared to life. It hurled him through a hellscape of rusted tracks, bone-sculpted tunnels, and walls smeared with laughter, literal laughter, carved into surfaces, echoing, building, and something fed off it. He passed scenes, children strapped into rides, laughing until they bled from the eyes, fed through tubes into writhing clown mouths. The laughter powered the rides. Laughter was fuel, and those who didn't laugh were torn apart to make others scream. As Elijah's cart slowed to a stop, a speaker crackled. Still not laughing? Don't worry. The fun's just beginning. The lap bar released with a click. In front of him stood a funhouse mirror, but it didn't reflect him. It showed Mark held in the arms of a creature with wings made of bones and a mask stitched from carnival tickets. Mark was crying. And behind him, the gate shimmered. Tall, iron, ancient, marked with one word: midnight. Elijah stumbled off the coaster, the phantom laughter still echoing in his skull. His legs felt like jelly, his mind like static. Around him, the carnival had changed again. He had entered the food court. Rows of candy-striped stalls stretched endlessly in both directions. Warm golden lights flickered above, casting a deceptive glow over everything. Scents hung thick in the air: popcorn, caramel apples, sizzling sausages, and something metallic underneath it all. He hadn't eaten since he arrived. His stomach growled. One vendor leaned forward from behind his stall, skin leathery and cracking like burnt wax. He wore a paper hat and grease-stained apron and had no eyes, just holes dripping with syrupy black ooze.
Hungry?
The vendor rasped.
Try the so-called dogs. They're fresh.
He reached below the counter and lifted a steaming hot dog. But the bun bled at the edges and something inside it twitched. Elijah backed away. Another stall clanged open. A cheerful woman with curls of blue cotton candy for hair giggled as she offered a cone topped with a swirl of something. It looked like ice cream. But as he stared, faces began to swirl in the cream. Screaming, melting, vanishing.
Just one lick.
She purred.
You'll see things clearer.
He turned, horrified, and nearly ran into a third vendor. This one didn't speak. He simply held out a tray of cupcakes, each frosted with an eye. A real eye. They blinked, following Elijah as he moved. He gagged. Then he heard it. A voice.
Elijah?
His brother's voice. Coming from behind a pretzel cart. He shoved it aside and found a small tunnel lit by flickering bulbs and stained with footprints. Tiny ones. Mark's footprints. Elijah dropped to his knees and crawled in, his heart slamming against his ribs. The tunnel was tight, lined with velvety carnival fabric, soft at first, then sticky, wet, like crawling through lungs. A whisper followed him, then dozens, then hundreds. Hands reached from the walls. Children's hands, rotting and gray, grabbing at his shirt, his legs, trying to pull him back. He screamed, crawling faster. The whispers grew louder.
You left him. You looked away. He's ours now.
He kicked, fought, and shoved through the clawing hands until he burst out the other side into a nursery. Not a real one. A twisted imitation. Carnival rocking horses, broken mobiles, spinning blades instead of stars, and dolls with lips sewn shut. In the middle sat a carousel crib, slowly rotating, and inside, Mark, sleeping. But he wasn't alone. Hovering above him was a tall figure cloaked in shadow. Its body a swirl of ticket stubs and streamers, its face a writhing void of laughter and pain. It turned and whispered,
You're late, brother.
Elijah stood frozen. The nursery seemed to breathe around him, walls pulsing like lungs, mobile blades glinting under a red glow ceiling. The figure above the crib twisted unnaturally, its arms too long, its limbs unfurling like serpentine ribbons. Carnival tickets peeled from its body like dead skin, drifting silently to the floor. Mark stirred. His tiny green eyes fluttered open.
Elijah?
He whispered, confused.
I had a dream about spinning.
Elijah lunged toward him, but the floor cracked, splitting in two like a jagged mouth. The carousel crib whirred faster, music box notes distorting into a demonic tune. The entity floated higher, its voice an echo of every carnival announcement Elijah had ever heard, layered atop a guttural growl.
Every guest must ride. One soul must pay the fare. One stays, one leaves. or both belong to the fair.
The carousel groaned as a second seat unfolded beside Mark's crib. It glowed with burning symbols, contracts etched in blood and bone. Elijah realized what it meant. The carousel ran on souls. Only one rider could be spared. If Elijah sat down, it would let Mark go, but it would keep him. He reached for his brother again, only for the entity to swoop down, hovering inches from his face.
Choose.
His heart pounded. He stared at Mark, still small and innocent, clutching a stuffed elephant stained with carnival dust. Then Elijah looked at the ride, at the clawed restraints, at the endless loop of screaming children whose voices whispered through the gears. Mark whispered again.
Please don't leave me.
Elijah did the only thing he could. He shoved Mark off the carousel hard. Mark tumbled across the floor before a wall opened behind him into a swirling red hallway. Elijah screamed for him to run.
Mark, run.
The entity shrieked. Carnival bells erupted into chaos, and the restraints snapped shut around Elijah. The carousel spun violently. His skin began to shimmer, stretch, and warp. And from the walls, dozens of laughing children's faces emerged. Elijah's scream echoed, then merged with the music. As he ran, Mark's bare feet slapped against the twisted, rubbery ground. The air buzzed with static and laughter, not the happy kind, but the wet, tearing giggle of something hungry. He turned down a hall lined with mirrors, each reflection showing him as something else, a puppet, a skinned doll, a carnival prize with hollow eyes. He didn't stop. Elijah had screamed for him to run. He couldn't look back.
Midnight. The gate opens at midnight for 1 minute.
The words burned into his mind. Elijah told him that over and over, like a lullaby. And now that Elijah was gone, that 1 minute was all Mark had left. The ground trembled beneath him. Behind him, wheels screeched, rusted tricycle wheels, dozens of them, followed by the slap, slap, slap of 2 long clown shoes dragging against tile. A voice oozed down the walls.
One left the ride. That's a no-no.
The laughter turned to howling. The hallway melted into a dripping funhouse, walls of melting wax and glass eyeballs. Mark shoved through curtains of hair, ducked beneath a swinging hook, and finally reached the midway. The carousel spun behind him in the distance. Dark now, its music corrupted and slow. But before him stood the midnight gate, glowing faintly red in the dead center of a cobbled arena. A skeletal clown held the key in its mouth, unmoving. Elijah staggered backward, hand clutched to his side, where blood seeped between his fingers. The creature, the twisted ringmaster, now fully transformed into a grotesque fusion of man, puppet, and porcelain clown, lurched forward. Its joints cracked as if it had been broken and stitched back together with nightmare threads. Its face, a writhing mass of wax and bone, split open down the middle. A second mouth, wider, hungrier, pulsed beneath the first. Rows of jagged teeth clacked in eager rhythm as thick strands of saliva dripped to the blood-slicked floor. Elijah's eyes darted to the carousel, still spinning violently, casting long, warped shadows like gallows ropes across the crimson fog. Mark was just steps from the gate, screaming for his brother. The gate glowed, open for only seconds longer.
Elijah.
Mark shrieked, tears streaking down his cheeks. Elijah turned back toward the creature. It cocked its head. From within its mouth, a chorus of children's laughter, mocking, hollow, and wrong, echoed outward like a taunt from the pit of hell itself.
You can still ride.
It gurgled, its voice stitched from 1,000 stolen throats.
We always have room for one more scream.
Elijah stumbled to his knees, every nerve in his body screaming, but his resolve turned cold and solid in his chest. With a surge of will, he pulled the jagged handle of a shattered mirror from his belt. Its edge glinted with carousel light, and for a moment he caught his reflection. Gaunt, bleeding, but still fighting. He charged. The creature opened its jaws wider, bones splitting outward like a blooming corpse flower, as Elijah drove the mirror straight into its gullet. There was no roar, a horrible, sucking sound, like air rushing into a bottomless wound. The creature convulsed violently, limbs flailing like puppet strings yanked by a mad god.
Run, Mark.
Elijah shouted, his voice ragged. Mark bolted through the gate just as it began to shimmer and close. Just as a clawed hand snagged his foot, he screamed. He kicked. The hand stretched. Elijah's hand, now gray and pulsing with veins, carnival tickets sticking out of his flesh like feathers.
Elijah?
Mark sobbed. His brother's face appeared, but it was melting, half mask, half shadow, trying to smile.
Tell them, don't ride.
He let go. Mark fell forward into the cold air of the real world. Just as the gate slammed shut behind him, the creature collapsed in on itself, shrieking in backwards voices, and then exploded into a storm of confetti, wet red confetti that sizzled as it hit the ground. But Elijah didn't make it to the gate. The carousel stopped. Silence settled. Elijah turned. The carnival had gone still, like it had taken a deep breath and was holding it, waiting. And then it sighed. Not with relief, with hunger. The walls pulsed again, and suddenly Elijah understood. This was the carnival's heart. The rides, the vendors, the games, they were just decorations. This was the truth. The carnival was alive. It ate memories, devoured families, and fed on grief and hope. And now it had chosen Elijah to become its next operator. The ground split beneath Elijah's feet, and hands reached up, painted hands, gloved hands, skeletal hands, to pull him down into the next layer. The carnival had many levels, and he hadn't reached the bottom yet. As he was dragged downward, the last thing he saw was the porcelain-faced clown slowly placing the mask over Elijah's lifeless face. And then, the screams of the damned drowned everything else. From the shadows beyond the carousel, dozens of figures emerged. Not clowns, not quite. Some were child-sized things in torn carnival uniforms, their faces stretched into rictus grins. Others had spinning Ferris wheels where their eyes should be, and carnival ticket stubs stitched into their skin like scales. They surrounded him. A slow clap echoed from the dark. The barker returned, no longer monstrous, but now more human, more charming, but wrong in the way mannequins are mistaken when they move. His smile stretched just a bit too wide.
You were quite the act.
He said softly.
A shame the curtain must fall.
Elijah stood tall, eyes glassy, breath ragged.
You won't get him.
Oh, no.
The barker replied.
But we got you, Elijah. And we'll make sure your performance never ends.
Chains slithered from the ground like metallic snakes, coiling around Elijah's wrists and ankles. The carnival erupted with applause, echoes of the damned clapping with skinned hands. And then, darkness. The darkness enveloped him, suffocating and thick, as he struggled against the chains that bound him. Whispers filled the air, promises of eternal performance echoing like a haunting melody, while the shadows danced, eager to claim his soul. But within the depths of that suffocating void, a flicker of defiance sparked in Elijah's heart. He could hear the distant laughter of the audience, but he refused to let their sinister joy extinguish the light of his spirit. His brother's body twitched like a puppet, head tilted, eyes glassy and wrong. Mark was found at dawn, curled beneath the old carousel. The ride was shut down, no signs of anyone else. He didn't speak for a week. When he finally did, all he said was,
"One ride's free."
His parents moved, but sometimes at night, Mark hears music, carousel music. He closes his window, clutches the elephant Elijah gave him, and whispers,
I'm sorry, Elijah.
"You made it out, this time." But the veil is always open, and it remembers your scent. Like what you heard? Then subscribe, and join us again in the dark.